Hi, welcome to That's Ready Mysterious, the show where every bite-sized mystery is rooted in reality. I'm your host, Kelly with an I, leading you through a maze of short stories that are filled with perplexing true mysteries. From missing people to unsolved crimes to eerie coincidences, each episode invites you to step into the unknown and question the ordinary. These tales aren't from fiction, they're stories history hasn't solved. Whether you seek suspense, love curious facts, or are just drawn to stories that linger in your mind, That's Ready Mysterious is your weekly passport into the truly strange, baffling, and unforgettable. Tune in and let the mysteries begin. Transcripts and references for all episodes can be found at that'sreadymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about Great Zimbabwe. At its peak, Great Zimbabwe was the second largest city in Africa. In more recent years, it was called the Machu Picchu of Africa. This is partly due to the mystery about the structure, as well as why its inhabitants abandoned it. Great Zimbabwe can be found near the present-day town of Masvingo Province, Zimbabwe. At its peak, Great Zimbabwe covered about 7 kilometers or 2.7 square miles. The city is built using dry stone techniques, not using mortar. The Great Enclosure of Zimbabwe is the largest ancient structure south of the Sahara. It had a 250-meter, or a little over 820-foot, elliptical wall which stood up to 11 meters high. The wall was built of granite without the use of mortar. The Great Enclosure had an inner conical tower whose purpose is still debated. There is a lion's gate at the entrance to Great Zimbabwe. The gate is decorated with stone-carved birds and a figure that looks like a lion. The lion is a symbol of power and authority. Great Zimbabwe has some very impressive features. Some prominent ones include the Great Enclosure, or the hill complex, and walls that stand up to almost 11 meters or 36 feet high. The walls have no mortar, but reach huge heights and use stone fittings instead of mortar. There are 4,046.8 square meters or 100 acres of granite enclosures. None of them are straight-walled. The hill complex had the royal living quarters and spiritual places. The valley ruins are thought to have been dwellings of nobles and tradespeople. João de Barros was a Portuguese historian. In 1552, Barros wrote about Great Zimbabwe, describing it as a square fortress masonry within and without, built of stones of marvelous size, and there appears to be no mortar joining them. He felt Great Zimbabwe was extraordinary because of its scale and aesthetic harmony, including curving walls, narrow passages, and careful stone placement, which all shows the culture that considered both engineering and design important. Other Portuguese historians believed Great Zimbabwe to be the biblical Ophir, or the lost land of gold. They point to the Bible for proof. In 1 Kings chapters 10, verses 11 through 12, the Queen of Sheba received gifts from Hiram. He brought her gold for the Temple of Solomon from a place called Ophir. Those historians believe they had found Ophir when they found Great Zimbabwe. This was believed for hundreds of years until the 19th century. In 1871, Europeans discovered Great Zimbabwe. On September 5th of that year, a German named Karl Mach was brought to the city by a local Karenga tribesman. Great Zimbabwe was considered the greatest pre-Portuguese ruins of sub-Saharan Africa. He believed that it wasn't possible for black people to have built it, saying that only white people could have done it. Soapstone and iron artifacts showed Mach that a civilized, read white, nation must have once lived there. Mach found wood at the site and cut it open. Within, he found a reddish scented wood similar to his pencil. Therefore, he determined that the wood must have been cedar from Lebanon, brought to the site by Phoenicians. Because of this, it was obvious to Mach that the Queen of Sheba built Great Zimbabwe. The truth, however, is that the wood matches characteristics of African sandalwood, which is a local hardwood. It makes more sense that the wood was locally sourced than that it was brought in from Lebanon. Later, people who visited the site recognized the wood, but this didn't happen for years. In 1867, Adam Render, a German-American hunter, stumbled upon Great Zimbabwe, although he was not the first to rediscover the ruins. After Mach discovered the ruins, his beliefs about Great Zimbabwe agreed with Cecil Rhodes, whose company occupied Mashonaland in 1890, racist beliefs that no black people could build something so amazing. In fact, on Rhodes' first visit to the site, the local Karenga chiefs were told that the Great Master had come to the area to see the ancient temple which once upon a time belonged to white men. Rhodes and his company, British South Africa Company, or BSA, sponsored an investigation into Great Zimbabwe. They hired J. Theodore Bent, whose only expertise was an antiquarian interest that came from travel throughout the eastern Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf. Bent also believed that the city was built by white men, but didn't believe in the link to the Queen of Sheba. He said that while they worked, the names of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba were on everybody's lips and have become so distasteful to us that we never expected to hear them again without an involuntary shudder. The artifacts that Bent found at the site, however, told a different story. They showed that the site had indigenous origins. These artifacts include pottery shards, spindle whorls, spearheads made of iron, bronze, copper axes, adze, hoes, and gold working equipment like tuyers and crucibles. All of these artifacts were similar to the household items used by the Karenga. Despite finding all of these artifacts, Bent didn't link the items to the local indigenous people. He claimed that a prehistoric northern race from Arabia built Great Zimbabwe. He said these people were linked to the Phoenicians and Egyptians, and that they eventually developed into the more civilized races of the ancient world. Bent wasn't totally incompetent. Richard Nicklin Hall, however, was. He was a local journalist and author of Ancient Ruins of Rhodesia. The BSA hired Hall to be the curator of Great Zimbabwe and gave him the mandate to not do scientific research at the site, but instead to preserve the buildings. Hall didn't care for his mandate and instead began an archaeological investigation to determine who built the site. He was looking for signs of white builders and essentially destroyed the top 3.7 meters or 12 feet of stratified archaeological deposits. Real archaeologists who later visited the site called his work reckless blundering, worse than anything I have ever seen. Word got back to BSA that Hall was incompetent and he was fired. Hall's disastrous activities left only vestiges of archaeological deposits within the walls, wrote Peter S. Garlake in his book Great Zimbabwe, a paucity that was to inhabit all future scientific work. After firing Hall, the BSA hired archaeologist David Randall McIver, a student of the great Egyptologist Flinders Petrie, to investigate the site. He quickly determined that the mud dwellings inside the stone enclosures are unquestionably African in every detail and belong to a period which is fixed by foreign imports as, in general, medieval. Despite these results, racial prejudices remained present at the site until fairly recently. In the 1960s and 70s, as the site became a symbol of African nationalist movement, the white government tried to hide the fact that Great Zimbabwe was built by the local indigenous people. These racial biases faded when the country, as it's known today, got majority rule in 1980. Finally, we can view Great Zimbabwe without the racial overtones. Archaeological investigations of Great Zimbabwe have proven that the monument's walls once enclosed houses. At one time it was a city which housed between 12,000 and 20,000 people at its peak. Even today, daga, the clayey mix of gravel that is Africa's most common building material, can be seen in the soil of Great Zimbabwe. Today, there are still some traces of mud houses there, but the stone walls are the real evidence of the city's greatness. The rock used at the site was quarried from a close-by granite hills. The rock used in the walls was easily split on its fracture planes, which gave the rocks a cuboidal shape and made them easy to stack without mortar. The walls are between 1.2 and 5.2 meters, or 4 and 7 feet thick, and are twice as high as they are wide, making for a very strong structure. The building method spreads pressure evenly over the ground and adjusts easily to subsidence. At the meeting places of the walls, they abut with unbroken joints, and there are no interlocking stones. In the best walls, the stones are knapped and dressed so well that they are as smooth as modern brick walls. Great Zimbabwe is the largest single prehistoric structure south of the Sahara. From the sky, it looks like a giant bracelet. The elliptical outer wall is more than 243 meters, or 800 feet long. It has an estimated 5,153.7 cubic meters, or 182,000 cubic feet of stone, more than can be found in all other sites of ruins combined. Garlake thought that the Great Enclosure, which circles a series of small stone walls and conical towers shaped like a beehive, was probably a royal residence. Great Zimbabwe was occupied in ancient times. Iron was in use by the 3rd century CE and was found at the site. Its finest walls were built in the 14th and 15th centuries when trade in the area was good. The site was built between the 11th and 15th centuries CE. Great Zimbabwe was located on the route between the area's gold-producing regions and ports like Sofala and the Mozambique coast. It had control of trade routes that connected the Swahili coast to inland areas. It is between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers and has access to gold fields, which are still active, cattle pastures, and trade routes that lead to the Indian Ocean. The resources that could be found in the area included gold, cattle, and agricultural resources like maize, sorghum, and millet. Goods like ivory, gold, and ceramics came through the city. The goods prove that Africa was not isolated and didn't depend on the outsiders for progress. Because the site contains stone monoliths and altars all over, as well as soapstone birds and figures, it's believed that the site may have been a religious center. By the mid-15th century, the balance of trade moved to the north, and local resources started getting low. Salt was becoming scarce. For these reasons, and possibly others, Great Zimbabwe was abandoned. Then, 400 years later, Malk found the site. It was inhabited by local Karenga, but they didn't know its history. Excavations of the area have shown interior furnishings like pot stands, elevated surfaces for sleeping and sitting, and hearths. There are no written records from Great Zimbabwe, but oral history and ethnographic studies show that they had a sophisticated social structure. The ruling class lived in the stone enclosures. The general population lived in the mud brick homes. Their religion was rooted in ancestral veneration and spiritual mediums tied to the landscape. Theories that have been disproven about the city include that it was built by the Phoenicians or Arabs and that it was built by a lost white civilization. The country of Zimbabwe's name came from the city and is believed to mean houses of stone in Shona. Bird sculptures found at the site are national symbols seen on the country's currency and flag. In 1986, Great Zimbabwe was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The city proved that Africa had its own centers of urban planning, political power, and global trade before colonization. Despite all we have discovered about the site, Great Zimbabwe still holds a lot of mysteries. How were inhabitants able to monopolize trade in the area? To what extent was Great Zimbabwe a religious center? Why was it abandoned? We now know it was built by Black people, but we aren't sure exactly which group or groups built it. There were many tribes in the area at the time, including the Shona and Venda, who both maintained that their tribe was responsible for the site. The Lemba, however, are particularly insistent that their tribe built the site. There is some evidence to support their claim. Whoever built it, it has been confirmed that it was the capital of the Shona-speaking ancestors of modern-day Zimbabwe. Today, the Shona people consider the site sacred. Who built Great Zimbabwe, and why did they build it? Was it royal living quarters or a ceremonial center? What do you think? Thank you for listening to this and all other episodes of That's Already Mysterious. I will be taking a break this summer. Subscribe to That's Already Mysterious on Spotify or YouTube, or follow on Instagram and Facebook to ensure you don't miss an episode when I come back. Have a great summer!